Welcome to Classic Storytime Hub. Tonight, we bring you a reimagined retelling of Robert E. Howard's chilling tale, The Fearsome Touch of Death. A story reborn in fresh words, crafted to grip your imagination and haunt your thoughts.
Midnight crept across the land, draping the earth in a shroud of shadow. And in that silence, one could almost believe the dead still reached for the living. Old Adam Farrell lay lifeless in the house where he had hidden from the world for 2 decades. A bitter recluse, he had died as he had lived, friendless, watched only by 2 men as his final breath slipped away. Dr. Stein rose from his chair, peering through the window at the deepening dusk. "You're certain you can endure the night here?" he asked quietly. Fallred, his companion, gave a short nod. "Yes, it falls to me, I suppose." The doctor gave a dry smile, a relic of an old custom, sitting vigil with the dead. Pointless perhaps, but tradition demands it. "I'll see if I can find someone to share the watch." Fallred shrugged. "Unlikely. Farrell was never liked, hardly even known. I barely knew him myself. Still, I don't mind keeping guard over his remains." As Dr. Stein peeled off his rubber gloves, Fallred's gaze lingered on them. The slick, clammy texture still haunted his memory, like the cold grip of death itself. A shiver ran through him. "You may find the night long," the doctor remarked, pausing at the door. "You're not the superstitious type, are you?" Fallred chuckled. "Hardly. From what I've heard of Farrell's sour nature, I'd rather watch his corpse than endure his company in life." The door closed, leaving Fallred alone with the silence. He settled into the room's single chair, eyes drifting to the shapeless form beneath the sheet on the bed. The dim lamp flickered on the rough table beside him as he tried to distract himself with a magazine. But the darkness outside thickened quickly, pressing against the windows. At last, Fallred set the magazine aside and let his eyes rest. His gaze returned to the still figure on the bed. Why did the sight of the dead unsettle so many? Perhaps it was ignorance, he mused, an instinctive dread of the reminder that death waits for all. His thoughts wandered to the life of Adam Farrell, a man without kin, without friends, who had rarely stepped beyond these walls. Whispers of hidden wealth had followed him, as they often do with misers, yet Fallred felt no temptation to search. Whatever secrets the old man had hoarded, then no longer mattered.
Fallred tried to lose himself in the pages of his magazine, but the task was duller than he had expected. Again and again, his eyes betrayed him, lifting from the print only to land on the bed across the room. Each time, the sight of the shrouded figure made him flinch, as though he had momentarily forgotten the corpse was there and had been rudely reminded. The reaction was slight, instinctive, but it angered him nonetheless. Only then did he notice the silence. It was not the ordinary hush of night, but a suffocating stillness that seemed to press in from every corner of the house. No creak of timber, no whisper of wind, no distant sound of life beyond the walls. Adam Farrell had lived apart from the world, and now, even in death, the isolation clung to him. Fallred shook himself, forcing his thoughts back to the printed words. But suddenly, a stray gust of wind slipped through the window. The lamp sputtered, flickered, and died. Cursing under his breath, Fallred fumbled in the dark, burning his fingers on the hot chimney before striking a match. The flame flared, the lamp came alive again, and his gaze fell upon the bed. He froze. The sheet had slipped away. Adam Farrell's face stared back at him, gray and rigid, the eyes wide and glassy, as if death itself had been caught mid-gaze. For an instant, Fallred's imagination betrayed him. It was as though some unseen hand had torn the sheet aside, as though the corpse were preparing to rise. He forced a laugh, though it rang hollow in the silence. The wind, nothing more, just the wind. Yet when he crossed the room to replace the covering, the dead eyes seemed to follow him, glinting with a malice that felt sharper than anything the man had shown in life. His hand brushed the cold flesh, clammy, unyielding, and he recoiled with a shudder. The touch of death. He returned to his chair, magazine in hand, though the words blurred before his eyes. Weariness crept over him at last, and he stretched out on the narrow couch in the corner. The lamp he left burning, telling himself it was tradition to keep a light for the dead. But deep down he knew the truth. He could not bear the dark with that silent figure watching. Sleep came fitfully. He started awake, heart pounding, eyes darting to the bed. The sheeted form lay motionless. The silence was absolute, and outside the night was black as a tomb.
Midnight crept closer, bringing with it that strange dominion it holds over the human mind. Fallred's eyes strayed once more to the bed, and the sight of the shrouded figure filled him with a growing revulsion. A wild notion began to take root, that beneath the sheet the body was no longer a body at all, but some grotesque, watchful thing. He could almost feel eyes burning through the fabric, fixed upon him with a terrible awareness. He tried to reason with himself. Such fancies were born of old legends, tales of vampires, restless spirits, and the undead. Since the dawn of time, mankind had cloaked death in horror, fearing not only the end itself, but the husks it left behind. Perhaps, Fallred thought, that ancient dread still lingered in the blood, whispering from the dark corners of memory. Yet the silent presence on the bed gnawed at his nerves. He considered pulling back the sheet, convincing himself that one look at the calm, lifeless features would banish these phantoms of imagination. But the thought of those dead eyes staring in the lamplight was unbearable. At last he extinguished the lamp. Darkness swallowed the room, blotting out the corpse from sight. And with the body hidden, the fear seemed to dissolve, shrinking back into nothingness. Fallred stretched out, a faint smile touching his lips at his own foolishness. Sleep claimed him almost at once. Fallred jolted awake, heart hammering in his chest, his skin clammy with cold sweat. For a moment he was lost in the blackness, then memory struck like a blade. The corpse, the other presence in the room. But what had roused him? A dream. Yes, a nightmare so vivid it clung to him still. Adam Farrell rising stiffly from the bed, eyes blazing like coals, lips twisted into a ghastly grin. The dead man had lurched toward him, hand outstretched, claw-like and merciless, until Fallred had torn himself awake. He strained to pierce the dark, but the room was swallowed in shadow. Not a glimmer of light seeped through the window. His hand crept toward the lamp, then recoiled as though from a serpent. To sit here in the dark with a corpse was torment enough, but to light the lamp and see what might be revealed? That thought threatened to shatter his sanity. Terror ruled him now, raw and unreasoning. Legends he had once dismissed returned with dreadful force, tales of the restless dead, of corpses infused with malice. In life, Adam Farrell had been nothing more than a bitter recluse. In death, Fallred's imagination had transformed him into something monstrous, a fiend crouched in the shadows, waiting to strike with claws steeped in madness. He sat rigid, blood like ice in his veins, wrestling silently with his fear. Reason flickered faintly, like a candle guttering in the wind. Then a sound cut through the stillness. Soft, stealthy. Fallred froze. He did not recognize it as the whisper of the night wind across the sill. To his fevered mind, it was the tread of death itself. He leapt from the couch, then faltered, paralyzed by indecision. Escape! Yes, he must flee! But his thoughts were muddled, his sense of direction gone.
Fear had shackled his mind, smothering reason. The blackness pressed in, waves of void crashing into his brain until his limbs moved sluggishly as if bound by chains. And then the most dreadful thought of all rose within him, towering and inescapable. The corpse was behind him, rising, reaching, closing in. He no longer thought of the lamp. He no longer thought of anything. Fear consumed him utterly, leaving no room for reason, no space for hope.
Fallred edged backward through the suffocating dark, his hands stretched behind him, groping for space, for safety. Cold sweat slicked his skin, and with a desperate effort, he tried to shake off the fog of terror clouding his mind. The bed. Yes, the bed was in front of him. That was where the corpse lay. That was where Adam Farrell should be. But if the presence he felt was behind him, then the old legends were true. Death itself had breathed a foul spark into lifeless flesh, and the dead did walk, prowling the shadows with malice for the living. The thought struck him not as reason, but as revelation, raw, unbidden, undeniable. And in that instant, man seemed nothing more than a helpless child, abandoned in a universe of black abysses and nameless horrors. He forced himself to keep moving, inch by inch, clinging to the fragile belief that the corpse remained on the bed. Then, his fingers brushed against something. Something slick, something cold, something clammy. The touch of death. A scream tore through the silence, echoing against the walls, followed by the crash of a body collapsing to the floor. When dawn came, the villagers entered the House of Shadows and found two corpses. Adam Farrell lay still beneath his sheet, untouched. Across the room sprawled Fallred, lifeless beneath a shelf. And there, forgotten by Dr. Stein, rested a pair of rubber gloves, smooth, damp, and cold to the touch. The same gloves Fallred's frantic hands had found in the dark. Rubber gloves, slick and clammy, like the very hand of death.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.